Research and Technology hearing to examine the harmful impacts associated with artificial intelligence systems, as well as the opportunities with artificial intelligence systems, the activities that academia, government, and industry are conducting to prevent, mitigate, and manage AI risks as these new technologies proliferate. I'm thrilled to be joined by this distinguished panel of witnesses, all of whom are in the room with us today. It is great to see your faces and to be together the first time since a March 2020 hearing, I believe. It is also of deep importance to be discussing the benefits and the challenges of artificial intelligence, the potential to influence many aspects of our lives and support our economic and national security. The applications in our everyday lives span from merely convenient, like recommending your next movie, to transformational, like aiding doctors in earlier detection of disease. In my home state of Michigan, advances in artificial intelligence by automakers are accelerating the development of autonomous vehicles that will lead to reduced traffic and increased road safety. Artificial intelligence systems are also increasingly used to analyze massive amounts of data to propel research in fields to enhance our understanding of the universe and cosmology, to synthetic biology, to weather prediction. Call our ancestors. But ill-conceived or untested applications of artificial intelligence have also, on occasion, caused damage. We have already seen ways AI systems can amplify, perpetuate, or exacerbate inequitable outcomes. Researchers have shown that AI systems making decisions in high-risk situations, such as credit or housing, can be biased against already disadvantaged communities, causing harm. This is why we need to encourage people developing or deploying AI systems to be thoughtful about what they're putting out into the world. We must develop the tools, methodologies, and standards to ensure that AI products and services are safe and secure, accurate, free of harmful bias, and otherwise trustworthy. We are in a moment of trust. Since taking over this gavel of the Research and Technology Subcommittee a few years ago, I have worked with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to promote Trustworthy AI. We're working together. I was proud to secure Trustworthy AI provisions in the CHIPS and Science Act that was passed and signed into law just last month, which also promotes includes the Promoting Digital Privacy Technologies Act, which passed the House and awaits a vote in the Senate, supports privacy-enhanced data sets and tools for training AI systems. Additionally, this committee led the development of the 2020 National AI Initiative Act to accelerate and coordinate federal investments in research, standards, and education of trustworthy AI. In that act, we also directed NIST to develop an AI risk management framework to help organizations understand and mitigate the risks associated with these technologies. We're all excited to be having today's hearing and to discuss the progress of this work and the many other things that NIST is doing to promote trustworthy AI. Academia and industry are supporting ethical approaches to artificial intelligence. Universities across the country are adopting principles for responsible use of AI and incorporating ethics into their computer science curricula. Industry is moving past theoretical principles into practical approaches to mitigating AI risks. There's more to do, there's jobs to be had, and people's lives are being impacted. With that, we're here in Congress to ensure that the United States continues to lead the world in artificial intelligence and trustworthy artificial intelligence. And we thank our witnesses for their time. With that, the chair is going to recognize Ranking Member Mr. Feenstra for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Stevens, for holding this important hearing today. I very much value this hearing, and I also want to thank Ranking Member Lucas for attending today. I'm very grateful for that also. And also to the distinguished panel that we have before us. I appreciate the time and effort that you have taken to come here and to give testimony on this important topic. Artificial intelligence is fundamentally changing the way we solve some of our society's biggest challenges. From healthcare to transportation, commerce to cybersecurity, AI technologies are revolutionizing almost every aspect of our daily life. But with every new and emerging technology comes new and evolving challenges and risks. Over the years, the Science Committee has held several hearings on AI, discussing challenges ranging from ethics to the workforce needs. I hope we can use today's hearing as an opportunity to further these important discussions and shed light on the importance of enabling safe and trustworthy AI. To do that, we have to first define what makes AI safe and trustworthy, and I believe our witnesses can help us shed light on that today. But in general, I think we can agree that safe and trustworthy AI will meet certain criteria, like including accuracy, privacy, and reliability. Additionally, it is important that trustworthy AI systems utilize robust data while also protecting the safety and security of the user data. Some other important factors of trustworthy AI includes transparency, fairness, accountability, and the mitigation of harmful biases. These factors are particularly important to keep in mind as these technologies are being deployed for the use in our daily lives. It is also critical that the data used in AI technologies is accurate, because the input data is the foundation, the literal foundation of AI. So that must be our general goal: transparent and fair AI with accurate data and strong privacy protections. We can ensure that by having the standards and evaluation methods in place for these technologies. The integration of trustworthy AI in key industries has the most potential use and significant competition to advance U.S. industry. AI and other industries of the future, like quantum science, can revolutionize how business and economics operate, improving efficiency, expanding services, and integrating operations. The key to these benefits, of course, is the trustworthy of AI. Here in Congress, members of the Science Committee introduced the Bipartisan National Artificial Intelligence Initiative Act in 2020, which was made into law through the FY 2021 NDAA. The legislation created a broad national security to accelerate investments of responsible AI research, development, and standards, as well as education for AI workforce. It facilitated a new public-private partnership to ensure that the U.S. leads the world in the development and the use of AI systems. Related to today's hearing, the initiatives required the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, to create the framework for managing risk associated with AI systems and best practices sharing to advance trustworthy AI systems. As a leader in AI research, measurement, evaluation, and standards, NIST has been developing their voluntary AI risk management framework since this last July. The framework has been developed through a consensus-driven, open, transparent, and collaborative process with multiple workshops for industry to provide input. I look forward to hearing more about the progress NIST is making in implementing this directive and finalizing this important guidance from Ms. Tabassi. I believe that AI risk management from this framework will be critical for our industry to better mitigate risk associated with AI technologies, as well as promote the incorporation of trustworthiness in every stage, from design to evaluation of AI technologies. I'm also looking forward to hearing from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to learn more about the work through the Commission on the Artificial Intelligence, Competitiveness, Inclusion, and Innovation, and how they are working to help build customer confidence in AI technologies. I want to thank our witnesses again for their participation. I thank Madam Chair for putting this hearing on, and with that, I yield back.
At some point in time, they will recall and remember that we had today's hearing that is now actually both meeting in person and virtually. So a couple of reminders to members, first members and staff who are attending in person, may choose to be masked. It's not a requirement. Any individuals with symptoms, a positive test, or exposure to someone with COVID-19 should wear a mask while present. Members who are attending virtually should keep their video feed on as long as they're present in the hearing. Members are responsible for their own microphones. Please keep your microphones muted or off unless you are speaking. Additionally, if members have documents they wish to submit for the record, please email them to the committee clerk, whose email address was circulated prior to the hearing. If there are members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record at this point. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Elham Tabassi. Ms. Tabassi is the Chief of Staff for the Information Technology Laboratory at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. She leads NIST Trustworthy and Responsible AI program that aims to cultivate trust in the design, development, and use of AI technologies by improving measurement, science, standards, and related tools. Ms. Tabassi is a member of the National AI Research Task Force and has been at NIST since 1999. Our next witness is Dr. Charles Isbell. Dr. Isbell is the Dean and John P. Imlay Jr. Chair of the College of Computing at Georgia Tech. His recent work focuses on building autonomous systems that can interact with large numbers of other intelligence agents, including humans and AI systems. Dr. Isbell also studies the effects of AI bias and pursues reform in computing education, focusing on broadening participation and access. He is an elected fellow of AACM, and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Our third witness is Mr. Jordan Crenshaw. Mr. Crenshaw serves as the Vice President of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Technology Engagement Center. He also manages the Chamber's Privacy Working Group, and which is comprised of nearly 300 companies and trade associations, in which developed model privacy legislation and principles. Prior to his current position, Mr. Crenshaw led the Chamber's Telecommunication and E-Commerce Policy Committee, which analyzes federal privacy, cloud computing, broadband, internet, e-commerce, and broadcast policies. Our final witness is Ms. Navrina Singh. Ms. Singh is the founder and chief executive officer of Credo. Credo AI. Credo AI helps organizations to monitor, measure, and manage AI-introduced risks. Prior to co-founding Credo AI, Ms. Singh was the director and principal of product in Microsoft Cloud and AI, where she built natural language-based conversational AI products. Currently, Ms. Singh serves as a member of the National AI Advisory Committee, which is tasked with advising the President and the National AI Initiative Office on topics related to the National AI Initiative. As our witnesses should know, you will each have 5 minutes for your spoken testimony. Your written testimony will be included in the record for the hearing. They're great testimonies. When you have completed your spoken testimony, we'll begin with questions. Each member will have 5 minutes to question the panel. We will start with Ms. Tabassi.
Good morning. Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Crenshaw, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I am Elham Tabassi, and I serve as the lead for the Trustworthy and Responsible AI program at the Department of Commerce's National Institute of Standards and Technology, known as NIST. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on NIST's effort to advance the trustworthy and responsible development and use of artificial intelligence. This committee is well aware of the importance of advancing research and standards to cultivate trust in AI. Thank you for your dedication to this important issue and for your support of NIST's role. Artificial intelligence holds the promise to revolutionize and enhance our society and economy, but the development and use of these systems are not without challenges or risks. Through robust collaboration with stakeholders across government, industry, civil liberties, and academia, NIST works to advance research, standards, measurements, and tools to manage these risks and realize the full promise of this technology for all Americans. Among its work, NIST is developing the AI Risk Management Framework, or AI RMF, to provide guidance on mapping, measuring, and managing risks associated with AI. Like the well-known cybersecurity and privacy frameworks, the AI RMF will provide a set of outcomes that enable dialogue, understanding, and actions to manage AI risks. Critically, the framework will focus on managing risks not just to organizations, but also to individuals and society. This approach is reflective of the socio-technical nature of AI systems as a product of the complex human, organizational, and technical factors involved in their design and development. As is the case with all our publications, NIST is taking a stakeholder-driven and open process to coordinate the development of the framework. From the start of this initiative last year, NIST has engaged a broad range of stakeholders, including through several workshops and public comment opportunities. Based on stakeholder feedback and consistent with congressional direction, NIST is on track to publish the final AI RMF 1.0 in January 2023. The technology and standards landscape for AI will continue to evolve. Therefore, NIST intends for the framework and related guidance to be updated over time to reflect new knowledge, awareness, and practices. Building off the AI RMF, there is much more work to do to develop additional guidance, standards, measures, and tools to evaluate and measure AI trustworthiness, especially for specific characteristics and use cases. For example, NIST has significantly expanded its research efforts to mitigate harmful bias with a focus on socio-technical approach. To support the advancement of AI standards, NIST seeks to bolster knowledge, leadership, and coordination on AI, including by engaging with other government agencies within the US and internationally. NIST engages with partners around the world, including through the Organizations for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and the US-EU Trade and Technology Council to advance shared goals in trustworthy and responsible AI. NIST also coordinates with other federal agencies and leads several policymaking and interagency efforts. This includes administering the National Artificial Intelligence Advisory Committee, or NIAC, which advises the President and the National AI Initiative Office. Advancing research and standards that contribute to more secure, private, fair, rights-affirming, and world-leading digital economy is a top priority for NIST. Thank you for the opportunity to present on NIST activities to improve trustworthy and responsible AI. I look forward to your questions.
Dr. Isbell.
Thank you. Subcommittee Chair Stevens, Ranking Members Feenstra and Lucas, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I am Charles Isbell. I'm a professor in and dean for the College of Computing at Georgia Tech. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today. So by way of explaining my background, let me note that while I tend to focus on statistical machine learning, my research passion is actually interactive artificial intelligence. As noted at the top of the hearing, the fundamental research goal is to understand how to build autonomous agents who must live and interact with large numbers of other intelligent agents, some of whom may be human. But I'm also an educator. As such, I spend much of my energy focusing on providing access to all those who wish to be a part of this ongoing conversation around the role of AI and computing in our lives. My discussion today and answers to your questions you ask will be informed by both my research and educator selves. So let us begin this discussion by defining our terms. There are many potential definitions of AI. My favorite one is that it is the art and science of making computers act the way they do in the movies. In the movies, computers are often semi-magical and anthropomorphic. They do things that if humans did them, we would say they required intelligence. This definition is borne out in our use of AI in the everyday world. We use the infrastructure of AI to search billions upon billions of documents to find the answers to a staggering variety of questions, often expressed literally as questions. We use automatically tagged images to organize our photos, and we use that same infrastructure to plan optimal routes for trips, even altering our routes on the fly in the face of changes in traffic. In fact, we let our cars mostly drive themselves in that very same traffic, playing the role of a tireless chauffeur. As noted by the chair, we're able to automatically detect tumors from x-rays, even those that trained doctors find difficult to see. We let computers finish our sentences as we type text and use search engines, sometimes facilitating a subtle shift from prediction of our behavior to influence over our behavior. Often we take advantage of these services by using our phones to interpret a wide variety of spoken commands. So in some very important sense, AI already exists. It is not the AI of fanciful science fiction, neither benevolent intelligence working with humans as we traverse the galaxy, nor malevolent AI that seeks humanity's destruction. Nonetheless, we are living every day with machines who make decisions that, if humans made them, we would attribute to intelligence. And the machines often make those decisions faster, and some might argue better than humans would. Yet, like all computing systems, at bottom, AI simply makes us more efficient. It amplifies our ability to make decisions, including bad ones, all too often automating the biases baked into our data and that of its developers. By way of example, according to the Marshall Project, most states use some form of automated risk assessment at some stage in the criminal justice system. We set out to predict recidivism as if that means the chance of committing a crime again, when in fact, what we're actually predicting is the chance of being arrested and convicted again. As with the shift from predicting behavior to influencing it, this distinction is subtle but important. Without recognition of the difference, one can create a feedback loop and make things worse without even noticing it. Although we sometimes act as if the machine is doing the work, it is worth noting that these machines are making decisions with us, with humans. They are partners, and as with any partner, it is important that we understand what our partner is doing and why. To make AI trustworthy, we need a more informed citizenry, something we can accomplish by requiring that our AI partners are more transparent on the one hand, but that we are more savvy on the other. So, speaking of definitions, by transparency, I mean that an AI algorithm should be inspectable, that the kind of data the algorithm uses to build its model should be available, and the decisions that such algorithms make should be understandable. In other words, as we deploy these algorithms, each algorithm should be able to explain its output. This applicant was assigned this score because it is more useful and less prone to misuse than just this applicant was assigned this score. But to really understand such machines, much less to create them, we should strive for all of our citizens to not only be literate, but to be competent. That is, they must understand computing and computational thinking and how it fits into problem solving in their everyday lives. In the long term, one of the key solutions to AI bias will be bringing a wider group of people into computing education and into machine learning more specifically. We have to improve the number and the diversity of those entering the field and participating in and influencing the conversation because it is the right thing to do, but also because it is the only way for us to compete. It should not be lost that putting these two thoughts together suggests that the process by which we build AI algorithms is a shared effort that requires a wide swath of citizens to be informed and engaged, and for developers to accept their responsibility for including the users of, and sometimes targets of, those systems in the development process itself. As a field, we have not caught up to the reality of the responsibility that we hold, and it is something that we simply must do. We must move from tool sets and skill sets to mindsets, incorporating responsibility in all that we do from the ground up. I'm very excited for this hearing. I think advances in AI are central to our economic and social future. These are all areas in which the funding power of the National Science Foundation and NIST as well can make a huge difference. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay, Georgia Tech, you convinced me. I'm signing up for his class.
Done.
All right, with that, we're going to hear from Mr. Crenshaw for 5 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Stevens, ranking members Feenstra and Lucas, and members of the Research and Technology Subcommittee. Good morning and thank you. My name is Jordan Crenshaw, and I'm the Vice President of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Technology Engagement Center. It's my pleasure to talk to you today about how we, business, government, and citizens can work together to build trustworthy artificial intelligence. AI is changing the world as we know it. By 2030, AI will have a $16 trillion impact on the global economy. But from a practical level, what does that mean? AI is helping forecasters in emergency management better track the intensification of hurricanes and chart out evacuation and emergency preparedness. It's allowing researchers to more easily pinpoint virus mutations and tailor vaccines for new variants. It's also bolstering our cyber defenses against an evolving digital threat landscape. And finally, AI has the potential to fill the gaps where we have worker shortages, like patient monitoring, where we have nursing shortages, and help tackle supply chain issues, where we have a lack of available truckers. The United States is not operating in a vacuum. Its strategic competitors also realize the benefits of this crucial technology. For example, prior to the invasion of Ukraine, China and Russia agreed to cooperate on developing emerging technologies specifically noting artificial intelligence. When it comes to AI, we are in a race we must win. AI is here now, and it's not going away. We cannot ignore it, and we cannot afford to sit on the sidelines and allow those who do not share our democratic values to set the standard for the world. For the research and deployment of AI to be successful, Americans must have trust in the technology. And while AI has many benefits, as I previously mentioned, in the wrong hands, like those of our adversaries, there could be harms. Americans are united in the belief that we must beat our competitors as well. In fact, according to polling by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, 85% of Americans believe the U.S. should lead in AI, and nearly that same number believes that we are best positioned as a nation to develop those ethical standards for its use. We agree. It's why the Chamber earlier this year established its Commission on AI Competitiveness, Inclusion, and Innovation, led by your former congressional colleagues, Representatives John Delaney and Mike Ferguson, and it's comprised of experts in business, academia, and civil society. The Commission has been tasked with developing policy recommendations in 3 core areas: trustworthiness, workforce preparation, and international competitiveness. Our Commission held field hearings in Austin, Silicon Valley, Cleveland, London, and here in D.C. And we've heard from a variety of stakeholders and look forward to presenting you with our recommendations early next year. In the meantime, while we wait for the Commission to finalize its report, we offer the following observations about what it will take to maintain trustworthy AI leadership. The federal government has a significant role to play in conducting fundamental research in trustworthy AI. The Chamber was pleased to see passage of the CHIPS and Science Act and hopes to see the necessary appropriations to carry out the science provisions. We encourage continued investment in STEM education. We need a trained, skilled, and diverse workforce that can bring together multiple voices for coding and developing systems. AI is only as good, though, as the data it uses. That is why it is key that both government and the private sector team up to ensure there is quality data for more accurate and trustworthy AI. Government should prioritize improving access to its own data and models in ways that respect individual privacy. At the same time, while we talk about privacy, as Congress looks to address these types of issues, it's important that we look at issues to determine whether or not we inhibit the collection of sensitive data and other types of data that could inhibit deploying trustworthy AI systems. Fourth, we need to increase widespread access to shared computing resources. However, many small startups and academic institutions lack sufficient computing resources to help develop solutions to artificial intelligence. That's why Congress took the critical step of establishing the passing the Resource Task Force Act of 2020. Now the National Science Foundation and the White House's Office of Science and Technology Policy should fully implement the law and expeditiously develop a roadmap to unlock AI innovation across multiple stakeholders. Finally, we also are encouraged and are thankful for the work by NIST in its development of the AI Risk Management Framework, which is a consensus-driven, cross-sector, and voluntary framework to leverage best practices. These recommendations are only the beginning, and I thank you for your time to address how the business community can partner with you to maintain trustworthy AI leadership. We thank you for your leadership, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. With that, Ms. Singh. Yeah.
Madam Chair, Ranking Member Feenstra, and Lucas, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today and to be part of this distinguished panel of witnesses. My name is Navrina Singh. I'm the founder and CEO of Credo AI, a venture-backed startup. In addition, I'm a member of the National AI Advisory Committee that is advising President Biden as part of the National AI Initiative. Trustworthy artificial intelligence is a topic that is deeply personal to me. Growing up in India as a girl who aspired to be an engineer, I learned early on that I faced an uphill battle for no reason other than my gender. Part of my passion for this subject and the main reason I founded Credo AI in March of 2020 is because I experienced firsthand what is at stake. While AI is an exciting and ultimately very useful technology, unless we create a culture of accountability, transparency, and governance around it, we risk unchecked growth in algorithms that may unintentionally encode the same types of societal ceilings and perceptions that I experienced as a girl in India, and that many others still experience today. Members of this subcommittee know very well the power and potential of AI when used responsibly. While it is a transformational technology that is evolving rapidly, I realize that there are different points of view on its perceived advantages. But one thing we can all agree on is AI is not going away, which is why we owe it to ourselves and to the world that our children will inherit to ensure robust compliance and governance structures to keep pace with the AI development. As this subcommittee studies the question of how to manage AI risk and build trustworthy AI, we think three key considerations merit special attention. First, I want to focus on full AI lifecycle, from design to development, to testing and validation, to production and use. That means building AI systems responsibly, continuously. It is fit for purpose, fair, transparent, safe and secure, privacy-preserving, and auditable. Secondly, context is paramount. We believe that achieving trustworthy AI depends on shared understanding that governance and oversight of AI is industry-specific, application-specific, model-specific, and data-specific to ensure that it is fit for purpose. This necessitates a collaborative approach to metric alignment and associated assessments. Third, transparency reporting and system assessments are critical for responsible AI governance. Reporting requirements that promote and incentivize public disclosure of AI system behaviors act as a key driver for establishment of standards and benchmark. And fundamental to this is access to compliant and comprehensive data for assessments. For these reasons, we at Credo AI advocate for context-based, full AI lifecycle governance of AI systems with reporting requirements that are specific, regular, and transparent. If we truly want to be a global leader in AI, then our focus should be on building responsible technology aligned with our societal values. Responsible AI is also a competitive advantage. It allows companies to deploy AI at scale with confidence, and this transparency promotes trust with consumers in this technology. Government has a critical role to play here, working together through public-private partnerships to ensure the right set of standards exist to further innovation in this space. And we urge the policymakers and standard-setting bodies to prioritize establishing context-focused standards and benchmarks that are globally interoperable and can help eliminate some of the guesswork. My 8-year-old daughter told me recently that she wants to be an inventor and a social media influencer when she grows up. While I'm grateful that in this country my daughter will have the opportunity to follow her dreams, we owe it to her and the generations that will follow to ensure that we build AI which is developed responsibly and ethically. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you. And at this point, we're going to turn to our first round of questions, and the chair is going to recognize herself for 5 minutes. In hearing your testimonies, I reflect on my time pursuing a master's in philosophy, of which my parents never understood why I got. But we were asking the ethical question about artificial intelligence that some ask in the theoretical space, that can AI replace human behavior? Does AI threaten what we do as people, seeking to overtake, the decisions that we make as people? Today's hearing is a little bit more instructive to the theoretical question. Today's hearing is saying, hey, we have artificial intelligence, and it is being utilized, but how is it being utilized? How is it being implemented? And is it implementing fairly and accurately for the best outcomes for society and for humanity? So in 2019, NIST developed the strategy for federal engagement in developing technical standards and tools for artificial intelligence. And Ms. Tabassi, I'm just wondering if you could touch briefly, because your testimony got me thinking on this, what was included in this strategy and why it is important that we have strategies for engaging in the development of technical standards for artificial intelligence. Has NIST's work on AI management framework revealed new or underdeveloped areas for standardization with regard to trustworthy AI systems? And then, because we want to hear from you on that, but then I want to hear from, Mr. Crenshaw, about the, how beneficial it is to industry actors for the federal government to lay out priorities on standards for critical technologies and artificial intelligence. Are you using these? But let's start with you, Ms. Tabassi.
Thank you very much for the question, Chairwoman. Yes, in 2019, we developed a plan for federal government engagement in development of technical standards. And it has several recommendations on bolstering research. That's really important for development of good, technically solid, scientifically valid standards, but also importance of public-private partnership and coordination across the government on bolstering our engagements in the standard development, and importance of international cooperations on development of standards that are technically sound and correct, but also reflect our shared democratic values. In terms of, let me also say that it also lists standards that are related and needed for trustworthy, responsible AI, and of course, many of the standards that's happening for information technology and software systems can be related to artificial intelligence and can be used there, but also need for other standards for addressing issues such as bias and explainability and trustworthy.
Right. And Mr. Crenshaw, are you using these, or is this helpful to what you were talking about?
The NIST process is incredibly helpful. It is getting the conversation started and providing the guidance that's necessary for industry to look to. It's incredibly important to have buy-in from the affected stakeholder community, and I have to applaud NIST for the work that they have done through their multiple rounds of comment, their multiple rounds of public engagement and public meetings to really get this right. And I think it's incredibly important, the work they are doing, that there is a set and guidelines for industry to look to. I think, on the domestic level, that is a guiding light for industry. I would note it's also important to remember standards bodies internationally as well. In order for us to maintain our leadership in this front, we need to make sure that we have American interests represented with American businesses and American policymakers being aware of that. We do know that our competitors are trying to pack those bodies, and we want to make sure that we are represented as well. I think yesterday.
So are you suggesting more investment?
I'm suggesting more participation. So.
Well, we did just reauthorize NIST, but, Dr. Isbell, what I was kind of getting at was the Turing test, which I know you're familiar with, but I don't know if that's really the question now. Is it, in terms of improving these outcomes with AI, and maybe this is too philosophical of a question, but is it the Turing test that we should be focused on, or what is the question that we should be focused on with the fair implementation of AI across a multitude of sectors that are determining our economy at grand scale? With 5 seconds left.
There is no question too philosophical. The short answer is it's not the Turing test. It's about the actual impact and outcomes on real people, and you have to bring those real people in to understand those outcomes.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to now recognize Mr. Feenstra, our ranking member, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Stevens, and thank you for those questions. And thank you again for all our witnesses. I really enjoyed your testimonies. There's extensive research going on in my home state and my universities and concerning AI, how it's being applied now and into the future. Iowa State's AI Institute for Resilient Agriculture is bringing together experts to lay the groundwork for developing AI-driven predictive plant models to increase the resiliency of agriculture. Researchers at the University of Northern Iowa are aiming to use AI to improve healthcare outcomes, increase privacy, online security, and create predictive maintenance systems for our products. And then in the University of Iowa, they're utilizing AI to improve the effectiveness of cancer screenings, as well as the work to identify and address biases in AI and healthcare models. These just are a few examples that are out there, and they're limitless. And I would just like to say, Dr. Isbell, I'm an academic also, and I did teach consumer behavior. And when you start looking at consumer behavior, there's a tremendous amount of AI being used, good and bad. Mrs. Tabassi, I understand that AI won't be replacing doctors, all right? I understand that. It won't be replacing nurses, but we also have the opportunity to learn about healthcare-related AI in research, as I just mentioned. Fostering trust in AI will be critical to utilizing applications such as these in the healthcare sector. And this is just one example. My question to you, if I can flip my page, can you explain how AI risk management framework will broadly applied across the different sectors and industries to minimize the negative impacts of AI systems and maximize positive outcomes? You can use any specific sector examples in healthcare if you wish, but I'd like to know more about that.
Thank you so very much for the question, Ranking Member Finstra. All of the examples that you said just show the potential of AI to really change our lives for better. I'm going to use the last example that you brought up, the cancer screening. So if we have a cancer screening tool, first, as mentioned several times, we wanted to make sure that it's accurate, it's working well. But beyond that, and then accuracy should also be balanced with associated risks and impact that it can have. So the question comes up about the bias or fairness. Does it advantage or disadvantage certain demographics? Beyond that, there are questions about the vulnerability and security and resilience of the AI model that can, we all hear that AI systems are brittle. Can that cause negative consequences? The issue of the privacy, the data that used to train the models, can we make sure that those are, the privacy is preserved and the training data are not inferred from the models? And then on top of that is, we heard about the explainability also. If the tool comes out and give a, for example, outcome or prediction that there is a cancer there, that's a very serious message to be carried to the doctor, to the patient. So explainability on how the model decide that there's a cancer there, and another level of complexity, the explainability needed for physician versus technician versus patient is different. AI RMF is trying to provide a shared lexicon, interoperable way to address all of these questions, but also provide a measurable process, metrics and methodology to measure them and manage these risks.
Thank you so much for that. That's great information. Mr. Crenshaw, in your testimony, you say that trust is a partnership. I 100% agree. And only when government and industry work side by side can trust be built. How did NIST work with industry in developing the AI risk management framework? And how is having a tool like the framework going to strengthen consumer confidence when it comes to building trust in the AI systems?
Well, I think, as I said, Congressman, trust is essential. And I think NIST has done a great job of really instilling trust in their work with the business community by being open and transparent. If you look at the comment record, it's comments from across the board, everyone from civil society all the way to industry and developers. And they're really looking to develop a robust record that I believe is a really great example for other agencies as they're looking at tackling this issue to look at. So they've had multiple stakeholder sessions. They've come in and actually spoken with our members and tried to get a good feel for where they're at. And really the partnership has been excellent, and I think it's a great example for other agencies moving forward in the space.
Thank you, Mr. Crenshaw. And I have questions for Dr. Isbell and Ms. Singh, but I ran out of time. So with that, thank you for your testimony. I yield back.
Okay. Great. And with that, we're going to hear from Dr. Foster for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my first general question, is this discussion converging? You know, I've been chairing the task force on AI and financial services for the last several years, and it strikes me that the complexity of AI behavior is increasing much more rapidly than our ability to categorize and regulate it. An example of that is a simple neural net classifier that's operating on a static data set to calculate credit scores or something like that has a relatively, it's an enormous, but it's a relatively finite range of behaviors to categorize. Okay, on the other hand, an interactive AI, which is an agent which is learning from other intelligent agents and guiding its behavior, has an enormously larger space of behaviors to categorize. And I just don't even see how you can possibly explain how an intelligent agent might react in any given circumstances. Like you can say general things like, you know, this child is a fast learner but makes a lot of mistakes. But that doesn't give you the granularity of detail you need. And so I was just wondering, since you've been all thinking about this, do you get the feeling that it is converging or not? Dr. Isbell on.
The short answer is no. The problems that we're talking about are exponential. All of our solutions are linear. You might as well ask the question whether human behavior is converging and we know how to understand and regulate that. And of course, the answer is no, but that does not mean that there are not things that we can do to make progress. And I do think a lot of the discussions that we've had just in the last couple of years around fairness, accountability, thinking about how to educate people to be a part of these discussions do make real progress. And that progress is very sudden and makes very sudden changes. So it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on this? Yeah, Dr. Singh?
Yeah.
Ms. Singh?
Congressman, I think that's a great question. I believe we are making progress towards convergence. But one of the key areas that I spoke about earlier is how important context is to this work. So one of the core asks that we have as standards emerge in the space is really thinking about context, the applications, and how we can make progress towards the right metrics and assessments along with the specific reporting requirements. And we are seeing globally, as well as the great work that NIST is doing, that there is a convergence that has started to happen in terms of having those contextual conversations.
Any other thoughts? It's a huge question. Let's see, many of you have emphasized education and the need for an educated public. So if you had to choose between a public that knew statistics or knew calculus, which would you take? I'm a physicist, so I naturally lean toward calculus, but it seems like what I use every day as a politician, statistics are relevant. And probably for AI, I think you're in the same bin. Do you have any, well, all right, Dr. Isbell, you have to deal with curricula, so you're on the seat again.
I'm not speaking for all of my colleagues. I think the answer is, if I had to choose, for most people, it would be statistics. But I'd also like them to know information theory and linear algebra. But fundamentally, it's about problem solving around data mattering as opposed to just the algorithms and the processes that you go through. And with that, you can solve a lot of the problems, or at least address and think about the problems that are coming down the pike.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts from any of you? What do you use every day, statistics or calculus? I think
Statistics.
Yeah, machine learning, it's back propagation is the chain rule, and I don't think there's much other calculus anywhere in it. But anyway, now, actually, this was for Mr. Crenshaw. You've emphasized international competition, and it strikes me that a lot of the countries that are clobbering us, you can't get out of high school without knowing calculus and probably statistics. There's all sorts of people showing up at school boards, unhappy that we're not supporting their preferred theology or mythology. But very few school boards are being inundated by people, demanding that our kids know statistics and calculus. Is there work to be done there?
There's definitely work to be done on the education front. We need to prioritize STEM education to ensure that we have the fundamental knowledge base for students across the country to get into this field, because we are going to need more coders and ethicists in this field who actually can assist with our leadership. The other thing I think would be important to note too is that we also need to make sure that we have talent in this country and retain talent and still attract talent. And one of the things that we found out through our AI commission is that we are going to lose the talent race if we don't deal with our immigration issues in this country as well, and make sure that we can retain talent after we've educated them here in the United States, make sure that we can keep our talent to ensure that we have people who know how to make ethical AI work.
Thank you. And when we, in a bipartisan way on this committee, have been doing everything we can to try to drag that across the finish line. I think we came within one senator of doing something significant in the CHIPS and science. Anyway, my time's up and we'll yield back.
And with that, we will hear from the ranking member of the full committee, who we're so grateful is here, Mr. Lucas, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Tabassi, in the AI initiative that we passed in Congress last year, we gave NIST the difficult task of defining what makes AI safe and trustworthy. Can you walk us through the process of how NIST determined the definition of trustworthiness? And while you're thinking about that, do you think this measure of trustworthiness also helps with the measuring of fairness in AI systems? Please.
Thank you so very much, Ranking Member Lucas, for the question. And in terms of the process for coming with definition of the trustworthiness, I want to thank the kind words that has been mentioned about the NIST process. But the process has been an open transparent, collaborative process. There has been many definitions and proposals for definition for trustworthiness. So we ran a stakeholder-driven effort to converge to the extent possible on the definition of the trustworthiness. And that, as was mentioned, include rounds of workshops and public comment and listening sessions. So that was the process. Your second part of the questions about the fairness. So fairness is one of the aspects of the trustworthiness as it's mentioned in the AIRMF. And fairness, as it was mentioned, is a complicated concept because it can depend on societal values and can change from context to context. But that's also part of the one of the aspects of the trustworthiness mentioned in the AIRMF.
Ms. Singh, in your testimony, you illustrate why you cannot have a one-size-fits-all definition of an algorithmic fairness. How does the AI risk management framework exemplify this?
As I previously stated, I really commend NIST for the risk management framework and how they're thinking through not only mapping different applications, but measuring and then overall management of those. At Credo AI, we are really focused on operationalizing responsible AI tenets and ensuring that continuous oversight and governance is provided of these systems. And I think for us, it is really critical that there are governance assets based on the context of AI application that gets generated that inspires that trust that Ms. Tabassi was just talking about.
Mr. Crenshaw, do you foresee U.S. industry widely adopting and utilizing the risk management framework since it's a voluntary tool, or will it need to be incentivized? While you're thinking about that, do you anticipate U.S. standard bodies will play a role in encouraging the utilization of the framework?
I think there's definitely a role there. I think they also have really gotten the conversation out about the need to develop standards. When it comes to the NIST risk management framework, I think what we've seen of it is promising. Obviously, we'll have to comment on the final product when it comes out, but I think it is a promising product. And I think given the fact that we've had such robust stakeholder input, I do anticipate that, given the direction things are going, we definitely could see stakeholder engagement to support the framework. And I think that's a good thing because we need guidelines and standards to get behind so we can develop trust.
Ms. Singh, do you have any thoughts on this point?
I think multi-stakeholder engagement is going to be critical in the process. And as we've been invited to give feedback on the NIST RMF, and we've done that actively over the past couple of months. As mentioned, I think there's a little bit more work to be done in terms of ensuring that we are looking at different applications and context.
Ms. Tabassi, any thoughts?
In terms of the adoption, I think that the adoption and use of the IRMF would be based on the value that it provides, and also giving awareness that these things exist is also very important. I thank, again, the committee and all of my panelists for the kind words about the process. And in terms of the context-specific, agree, and a lot more work needs to be done. And we have a call for contribution, particularly for that.
One last question, and I come back to you, Ms. Tabassi. Why is it important for democratic nations to lead the development of international standards for trustworthy AI systems?
I believe it's important to affirm our shared democratic values of openness, protection of democracy and human rights, and design and develop technologies that operationalizes those values. And we need standards for technologies that are rights affirming and show those values.
Just the way I intend to answer questions about that in my town meeting someday. Thank you. Yield back, Madam Chair.
With that, we are going to hear from the Congresswoman from North Carolina, Ms. Ross, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Stevens and Ranking Member Feenstra, and thank you to the panelists for joining us today. On April 29th of last year, represents a larger problem of cybersecurity and privacy issues in this country. AI innovation happens fast, and we need legislation that's equipped to grow into this quickly expanding sector. For my constituents in the Research Triangle and for national security more broadly, we need to invest in long-term structural infrastructure that ensures better cybersecurity and privacy in our tech sector. We also need to look at how AI affects the arts and our creators, and we all have many of them in our district. So I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on how we can ensure that systems of machine learning can be created with consideration for individual privacy, corporate privacy, intellectual property, and national security. But since none of the folks who have asked questions yet have talked about intellectual property, and I serve on the Judiciary Subcommittee on that, I'm going to ask Ms. Tabassi, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, I want to thank you for your important work on the draft of the Artificial Intelligence Risk Management Framework. But I also want to talk a little bit about intellectual property, because the United States takes our intellectual property protections very seriously. And without those protections, there's a significant threat to American creativity, ingenuity, jobs, and our economy. And AI offers opportunities to artists and creators to enhance the creation process in many ways, but that also presents risks. And there are services and sites available today that use art, books, music, and other American-made works as inputs to train AI. Based on what is happening with image-generating AI currently on the web, we can already see that artists will have to compete with AI creations in their own style and trained on their own content when they were neither consulted nor compensated for this. And as a matter of fact, there was a recent article that I just read about that. Is this issue on NIST's radar screen, and what can we do about it?
Thank you so very much for the question, Congresswoman. And we have actually received comments to that effect to AI-RMF, and that's a serious problem. Certainly something that would be part of the discussions in the future drafts of the AI-RMF. A lot of work needs to be done, and that would be definitely be part of the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. I do have a couple of other questions. Dr. Isbell, your written testimony talks about the Marshall Project and the use of risk assessment in the criminal justice system. How can transparency increase the ability of individuals to protect their information and avoid undue scrutiny? And to whom should individuals direct their concerns if they believe that their data has been misused?
So it's actually quite a difficult problem because the data that we have is out there everywhere, and we leave a trail everywhere that we go. Fundamentally, there has to be policy and there has to be infrastructure. This is a role that the government has to provide a mechanism by which people can deal with issues where their data have been misused. It is not a thing that will naturally come from industry. It is not a thing that naturally comes from the educational sector. It is something that has to be dealt with by the legal system.
And can you tell us about any law enforcement practices that we should be aware of as we're considering changes to the legal system?
Well, I think the short answer is you have to think very carefully about and look at the way that the systems that are out there are currently being used and how they're currently being misused. And having done that, it takes you down a path towards understanding how you have to try to address those one at a time. It's a pervasive thing that touches everything. We don't have time to talk about this now, but earlier someone made a comment that doctors will not be replaced by AI. Well, they're already being replaced by AI, and they're being done in an unregulated way that's having an impact on people. And you have to recognize that, and you have to address it context by context and one case at a time.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Great. And with that, we're going to hear from Dr. Baird of Indiana for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate you and Ranking Member Feenstra for holding this important hearing. And I really appreciate, I always do, the expertise of the witnesses and their ability to answer our questions, and it's very important and very specific. My first question goes to Dr. Isbell, and I want to know what role have the universities played in the development of the AI risk management framework? And more broadly, how are universities helping to shape the future of AI by engaging in public-private partnerships? Dr. Isbell?
So the higher education in general is universities have participated by being invited in and being a part of the conversations. Individuals and organizations have continued to participate in all of these discussions around standards, including things that NIST has done, but also through operations of institutes that have been created, for example, by NSF. What the universities do, what our role is to do the basic research that exists, to create the basic research, ask the basic questions, and then to educate the students who are going to go forward and to do that work. A lot of the work that we do, a lot of where we play that role is in actually identifying the fundamental problems. That is sort of what academic freedom allows you to do, and that's what we continue to do. The environment that we create is one that allows us to ask these questions and to make them available for industry and make them available for government to take the next step. That's what we do.
Well, thank you very much. Ms. Tabassi, to your knowledge, has the People's Republic of China developed a similar tool to the AI risk management framework? And what about any of our allies? And so what role, if any, has NIST played in sharing findings and the best practices with the international community, particularly our allies? So if you have any thoughts in that area, I would appreciate it.
Thank you so very much for the question, Congressman. In terms of cooperation and collaboration with our allies, the stakeholder engagement effort that we run includes our international partners. So they have been involved in terms of providing input to the IRMF, coming to our workshops and participating on those events. But we also interact with them and talk with them in forums such as Trade and Technology Council, Quad, or OECD. So there is a good, strong, robust engagement going on that way.
Thank you. Then my last question goes to Ms. Singh. So in creating the tools to help companies develop responsible AI, what are some of the most common concerns with AI systems that your company has seen?
Thank you so much for that question. If responsibly not built, artificial intelligence is going to have very varying impacts on different use cases. So across the companies that we work with, one of the things that is critical is, again, really having a holistic view of from the time you're designing the AI system to the actual use, making sure that you're interrogating the technical systems, you're interrogating the processes, as well as you're interrogating the outputs. So this goes back to really identifying any unintended consequences that could appear in the entire AI lifecycle.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the witnesses' responses. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Well, I was going to, I think I'm the next questioner, and I was going to thank the chairwoman for this great hearing, but I certainly want to thank the panelists. Your testimony is great. What a great and incredible subject. I want to get right to questions, though. Ms. Tabassi, how might standards and assessments be developed and for explainability and interoperability?
We do that the same way that we do any type of other standards with true stakeholder engagements and working with the whole community. The broad stakeholder engagement is really underlines everything we do at NIST, and explainability, interpretability, difficult, complex topics. We do have some foundational research going on. Our researchers are working on this, but we also augment it with the work with the whole community.
Okay, well, I've been on standards committees, and I know what kind of work goes in. So you're saying it's a similar process, or would be a similar process?
Correct. Doing the internal research, providing technical contributions, working with the whole community on strengthening the research and taking the contributions to the standard development organizations and hopefully see them through become international standards.
Thank you. Dr. Isbell, in math and physics, systems and solutions are considered unstable if small changes in the initial conditions result in large changes in the solutions and outputs. Are AI systems unstable in terms of the data input, and if so, how can that be mitigated?
So some of them are. There's a wide range of ways of doing AI and machine learning, and some of them are quite stable and some of them are less stable. There's a lot of theory behind this and a lot of work that's been done over decades to get there. I think the most important thing actually is not the sort of instability that you're talking about with small changes, but that we don't actually understand how the set of parameters that go into the way that we build these systems have that impact. It's actually less about the data in that sense and more about the way that we build the systems in the first place, and that has remained largely unexplored.
Thank you. That'd be a great area for research. Thank you. Ms. Tabassi, can you touch briefly on what's included in the strategy in engaging technical standards for tools for artificial intelligence?
Thank you for that question, Congressman, and yes, happy to. That strategy for working towards the standard was developed in 2019, and we have basically implementing the recommendations of that plan since it has been developed in 2019. What's in the plan? It's basically talks about standard development processes, talks about AI standards, what's needed, and concludes with recommendations on what needed to maintain U.S. leadership in development of the technical standards. And recommendations very broadly is about strengthening research for development of scientifically valid standards, public-private partnership to be able to do that research and build those foundations, and international cooperations for development of standards. I just also want to note that that plan was also developed in a stakeholder-driven effort with a lot of input from the community.
Thank you. So what extent is the U.S. already collaborating with the EU and other like-minded nations on developing standards for trustworthy AI?
Multiple ways. One of them is by expert-to-expert scientists working on what we call pre-standardization research to actually provide the scientific foundations for the standards, and then cooperation for going to the standard meeting and seeing them through to become international standard, but also at the forums such as TTC and Quad.
Mr. Crenshaw, I didn't want to leave you out. Would the Chamber and presumably many U.S. businesses support the development of a United States AI regulatory law?
I think given the state of the technology, we believe it's premature to get into prescriptive regulation. We support voluntary frameworks like we see at NIST. A few areas, though, I think we would like to see regulation is for things like consumer privacy. We'd like to see a national standard put in place. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the process at NIST can work itself out first before we start making any kind of determinations on regulation. And it's also an issue, though, our own AI Commission is working through as well to make recommendations for.
Thank you. My time's expired, and I'm going to call on Mr. LaTurner. You're up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Ms. Singh, in your testimony, you talk about the need for policymakers to establish benchmarks for fairness when it comes to responsible AI. Yet you also talk about how industry-specific and context-driven artificial intelligence factors preclude standard-setting bodies from creating one-size-fits-all metrics. In a context-specific field, How can Congress create meaningful regulation that ensures AI systems retain algorithmic fairness?
Thank you so much for that question. I think the work that NIST is doing is a good example of the public-private partnership that is needed to ensure that we are doing thoughtful policy making and standards that are very context-specific. As I've stated previously, in artificial intelligence, the question that we should be asking ourselves right now is how can governance and oversight keep up with the development of artificial intelligence? And so we believe that standards are going to be critical, especially as we think about transparency reporting. And transparency reporting is going to be a complete view into the AI lifecycle that can help with benchmarking.
What could we be doing differently with Congress and public-private partnerships? Do you have any recommendations on how we could be doing it better?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. We've given some feedback to NIST on that. I think we have to really step back and think about the AI application as well as what the impact to the stakeholders within that AI application is. And I think going back to context-centric metrics as well as context-centric reporting requirements is one of the first steps we believe is going to help move this industry forward.
How can developing responsible AI give the United States an economic and societal competitive advantage over other countries?
Thank you. I think that is a fantastic question. We at Credo AI believe that responsible AI is a competitive advantage because it is not only going to help United States and the companies here deploy AI with confidence, but as we make sure that the standards that emerge, which are aligned with our societal values, that is going to promote more consumer trust, which, as you can imagine, is going to further bolster our leadership in artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Ms. Singh. Dr. Isbell, you state in your testimony that there are many occasions where tech workers cannot be certain how AI algorithms reach the correct answer. And these algorithms are known as, quote, black box models. If for any reason these types of algorithms reach an incorrect or biased outcome, like the ones you describe in your testimony, it can be nearly impossible to diagnose. If we want to solve the problem of black box models by making an algorithm's data set more transparent, then what countermeasures can we take to bolster AI security from hackers? To your knowledge, are there any examples of AI developers that are already addressing this issue?
So there's a large amount of work that's being done in academia at the level of basic research to understand differential privacy, to understand how it is that people can interfere and break into the way that machine learning algorithms actually work. So there's a lot of work. It's in early stages, but a lot of great stuff is being done. How much of that? Not a lot of that has necessarily been deployed in the systems that are out there now, I think in large part because the incentives haven't necessarily been there. What drives industry and drives the people who build these systems and deploy them to touch on this is requirements that either through the market or through policy, that if they don't do this, they're simply not going to be able to deploy their systems and to have them used and adopted by large groups of people. So there's a lot of work that's been done out there, a lot of specific things. I would start with differential privacy, and there's lots of researchers that have done great work on this. But at the end of the day, it's really going to be about creating the incentives for people to want to take advantage of what we know in order to keep things secure.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Great. And with that, we are going to hear from Mr. Byer of the Commonwealth of Virginia for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, very much. And thank the witnesses for really interesting feedback, but also thank my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, for some very good questions. Ms. Tabassi, I know you've taken on this tremendous task of managing, developing the AI risk management framework. You heard from Mr. Crenshaw of what the Chamber is doing with its commission. And I think you've heard pushback about how we're not ready to have mandatory standards, that we're still so early that we don't want to overreact, we don't want to overregulate. But at the same time, is it not naive to think that we can make this voluntary indefinitely? that at some point there won't be a need for clarity in terms of what is demanded and expected from businesses in AI?
Thank you very much for that very thoughtful question, Congressman. NIST AI RMF is a voluntary framework, just like any other frameworks that NIST has developed. The use and adoption of that, at least I believe, would be based on the value that it provides. And another strength of the voluntary process that we are doing is based on the stakeholder engagement and stakeholder-driven process that we are following in development of this voluntary tool. It gets opportunity to the whole community to provide their input, their comments. So by the end, the final tool would be a more effective resource that everybody that participate in development of that would have a buy-in in that. So by that, I think having the value on using this and having buy-in because of participation in the process in developing that would help with the adoption. NIST is a non-regulatory agency, and the things we put out are voluntary.
We know that. So thank you. I understand you're non-regulatory, and ultimately it will come back to us. And then come back to us just based on dangers. Dr. Isbell, I was fascinated by your testimony because so much what we talked about today is concern about biases. But you also had a wonderful paragraph about the upside of machine learning and artificial intelligence. Can you expand on that a little? It seems to me that we as human beings dramatically underestimate the potential for what artificial intelligence can bring humanity.
So there's a particular law, and I forget what it escapes me right now, but what the law says is that we overestimate the short term and we underestimate the long term. And I think that's exactly what's been happening with AI. There was a lot of hype back in the 70s and 80s before the AI winter with all the great changes that AI was going to bring to the world. They were wrong, they were overhyped. But it's turned out that the impact that AI has been profound and far deeper than anything anyone even imagined back then. It has infiltrated every part of our life, and I use infiltrate in a positive way. We will be doing a better job of detecting when people are sick in ways that we were never able to do. We will be able to help people to make decisions they otherwise would not have ever been able to make. We will be able to connect with one another in ways that we have not been able to connect with one another before. And a large part of it will be because of computing and it will be because of AI. It's all very positive. The opportunities in front of us are huge, and it will help us to solve big problems that we currently have a hard time thinking through, and those problems over decades and even over centuries. The problem that we have, of course, is that we have to set up the incentives to allow people to do that, and we have to make certain that everyday people understand enough of what's actually going on so that they can make rational decisions about how to use that technology in their own lives.
Dr. Isbell, I'd love to have a question for the record. If you could find one of your research assistants to find out the name of that law.
I will.
Dr. Ben Cerf told it to me 30 years ago, and I've always attributed it to him, but it probably has a deeper root.
Absolutely.
But very powerful. Dr. Singh, one quick question. We've been struggling with facial recognition technology on police body cams. Is this something that you're working on too, that the notion that people of color, especially women of color, are picked up inaccurately much more frequently than others?
Thank you so much for that question. We at Credo AI work across a diverse range of applications, including facial recognition. And as I stated previously, I think any artificial intelligence that is not developed responsibly is going to impact all of us, and especially the marginalized communities, which in the past have been excluded because of gender, ethnicity, color, are at a higher disadvantage here. So building responsible AI is not just competitive advantage, but it is going to serve humanity really well.
Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to hear from Mr. Gonzalez of Ohio for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Feenstra, for holding this hearing. Thanks to all the witnesses for your testimonies. Ms. Tabassi, we talked a little bit about the AI risk management framework, and that was helpful. I'm curious, has China developed a similar tool? What is China doing specifically around this?
Right. So I believe it was in 2017 that China put a very ambitious domestic AI plan out. To the best of my knowledge, there isn't anything that they're doing similar to the AI RMF. If they're doing it domestically, I don't know, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Crenshaw, I'm going to switch to you for a second. Unlike most countries that have a top-down government-led approach, the U.S. has a bottoms-up, industry-led approach to standard setting, which I think is appropriate. We employ a voluntary system which relies on industry participation and leadership. This market-driven approach enables competition, ensures transparency, and takes advantage of consensus building to drive us to the best possible outcomes. Can you explain how the U.S. approach to AI through the AI risk management framework drives innovation?
Well, I think it's interesting to know, during one of our hearings, we actually had one of the co-chairs of the National AI Advisory Committee come testify, Miriam Vogel, and she said, the reason we needed to maintain leadership in this country is because we have a brand of trust compared to other countries. And it's important that we have standards in place that are voluntary, that will be adaptable to this new and developing technology. But at the same time, we'll look at things like risk. And it's important that we have real, firm guidance in place. And another, I think, as I said before as well, when it comes to international standards bodies, we need to make sure that the United States is well represented. The CHIPS and Science Act actually help provide funding to ensure we can participate in that space. But at the same time, too, as companies look at things like developing implementation for compliance or following guidelines, if they go out there and say, we're following this guideline, and they're found not to be, there is some teeth there.
Yeah.
So there are agencies that can enforce there as well.
Great.
So there is great trust to be had by establishing leadership and trust against other countries.
Dr. Isbell, with your role on campus as a professor and dean, what do you believe the appropriate role of the university are in shaping the future of AI?
Twofold. One is to do research. We have one of the best systems in the world around basic research. Our research ones are amazing, and all the way down to our research twos, and even our community colleges are able to bring people in and to think about and engage in the conversation around AI or any other large important issue. So the research is important, and maintaining and supporting that is important. But the second, and perhaps the most obvious, is the fundamental mission, which is educating people. Not just educating the people who are going to do the research, but I think importantly, and especially when it comes to AI and machine learning, it is educating everyone else who is not going to do AI and machine learning research, but will be affected by it, who will be adjacent to it and will be far away. As I told my son, who is deeply into history, you will not be able to get a degree in history in 5 years without knowing machine learning and AI, because it's still going to be data-driven. And so our responsibility is to make certain that everyone is a part of that conversation.
Great. And then I agree 100% on the research point, actually on both points, but one thing we talk about a lot on this committee is how do we get the research, the incredible research that's happening on our university campuses, out into the public space and then driving innovation in the private sector. So what do you think we need to be doing to have I'll just call it a more robust sort of flywheel of research taking place on college campuses, leads to innovation, leads to private companies, et cetera, et cetera?
So we actually do pretty well with that, I think. But I think the biggest problem right now is that there's a mismatch between what the company, pick your favorite company, wants to do in the next 6 months to a year versus what the basic research that's looking out 5 or 10 years actually is. Support through organizations like NSF, for example, to help partner with those companies, to partner with industry, to help do the basic research in universities, I think is the best way to get that translational work done from the lab out into the world. And when it works very well.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. With that, we'll hear from Congressman Sherman of California for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to participate in this subcommittee's hearing. Without objection, I'd like to enter into the record an article I wrote 22 years ago, Engineered Intelligence, Creating Our Successor Species. My line of questioning is going to be about things that won't affect us until the second half of this century. But since they relate to whether humankind will continue to be in domination of the planet Earth, they're important. We're right now, the computer engineers and the bioengineers are racing to create a new level of intelligence. And the last time there was a higher level, new level of intelligence appeared on the planet is when our ancestors said hello to Neanderthal. It did not work out well for Neanderthal. So my focus is on whether we're going to see artificial intelligence that has general intelligence, self-awareness, and what I call ambition or survival instinct or care. And that third thing I should go into more. I tend to think that our successor species would be biological because even the dumbest worm seems to care if you try to turn it off or kill it. Whereas the smartest computers we have so far don't care if you unplug them. So my concern is, what are we doing to prevent or monitor for general intelligence, self-awareness, and ambition or survival instinct? Or are we just going to ignore those issues and focus on things that affect us in the next decade? Ms. Tabassi.
Thank you very much, Congressman, for the question. It's hard to determine when or if we can reach, or the community can reach to artificial general intelligence. I will say that that's...
Well, I mean, we're going to get there someday.
Right.
We just don't know.
Very good, very good. So we don't know when we're going to get there. So from the NIST point of view, we think that that's one reason to work on foundational principles. That's why it's now timely.
Is anybody doing any technical research about how we can get very useful computers that we somehow put something in there, a governor, if you will, that prevents general intelligence or prevents self-awareness or prevents ambition and caring? Is anybody doing the research as to how we can get what we want without getting what we don't want?
I'm not aware of that research being done at our laboratory at NIST. Across the academia and the community, I don't know. Thank you for the question.
I'll ask the other witnesses. Is anybody aware of us trying to prevent, as we try to harvest the benefits of artificial intelligence, the creation of an ambitious, self-aware computer that may very well decide that we're irrelevant to this planet? Is anybody figuring out how to do that, or is it just an issue we're all aware of but aren't really trying to confront? Does any witness have a comment? Yes, Mr. Doctor?
So I guess yes, and thank you for the question. I actually, one of the reasons I got into AI in the first place were these, what I consider pretty existential and philosophical questions around what does it mean to build intelligence. I think the answer is that people discuss these issues all the time. They try to figure it out. They try to work it through. We don't have any large research, at least that I'm aware of, any large research agendas around preventing general intelligence, in part because we have no idea how to get there from here. And I think one of the things that I would leave...
What about those two other issues? How to prevent self-awareness, how to monitor for self-awareness, how to prevent ambition or a survival instinct, how to monitor for a survival instinct?
I don't think it's done in those terms. I don't think it's done in those terms. It's done in simpler terms around preventing harm.
Well, we're going to concentrate on the harm that could occur in the next decade.
That's right.
Nation or artists that lose their the benefits of their creativity. And it doesn't seem like anybody's worried about the problems we'll confront in the second half of this century. And with that, I yield back.
Great. And with that, we're going to go to another round of questions because we're just having so much fun here, and the chair's going to recognize herself for 5 minutes. I think this question about where and how we're determining the ethics is very important. Obviously, we have so much respect for NIST and an understanding of the role that standards play. We could go philosophical again and ask, are standards ethics, and how do ethics arrive out of standards that come from rigorous processes that are inputted by, we talked about the companies, we've heard from Dr. Isbell about the people element that needs to get involved with the standards. But Dr. Isbell, some universities are already including ethics as a curriculum, and long have. You go into a philosophy department, you're going to get an ethics course. Hopefully people take it. But ethics is a curriculum requirement for computer science degrees in particular. Great start, but it's often, obviously, sometimes a separate course and may not be directly connected to what students are learning in other courses. You've changed your approach at Georgia Tech, and so I was just wondering if you could elaborate on what you're doing to integrate ethics education and how you're assessing its effectiveness. And I also, just because that's a question, I know you can answer it, but I just really want to applaud you for a segment in your testimony that I encourage everyone to look at, where you said, computing has long been an intellectual Wild West, where things changed so fast that the priority was always to find what's next, to find the better solution. Now we've succeeded in finding solutions so good that they are intertwined in nearly every area of our personal lives and communities. So can our laws move fast enough? Can our ethics move fast enough? And where and how do we find this arising? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I really appreciate it. I will say that, people in my field have spent 40, 50 years trying to convince everyone that what we did was really important, and it turns out we were right. And then what we're living with now are the consequences of having been right. So when it comes to ethics and responsibility, I think Georgia Tech, we've had that as a requirement for CS going back at least about 30 years. But what we had done wrong, and not just us, but I think the way that we approach this, is that we treated it, as you say, a separate class, something that gets stapled on at the end. It's a requirement. Nobody takes it till their last semester. It doesn't get integrated into the rest of the curriculum, and it can't. So one of the things that we did recently is we kept it as a requirement, and we made it a prerequisite for our junior year-long design classes. So by the time you're a sophomore, know just enough to be dangerous. You're at a place where you're being forced to think carefully about the consequences of the systems that you build, and then you are asked to build such a big system. This is before you take Intro to AI. This is before you take Intro to Machine Learning. This is before you take Introduction to Cybersecurity and Privacy. So it puts you in a place where the people further down the chain can actually now ask you the direct questions that they couldn't do before because you wouldn't have the language or the experience to be able to do them. That is what's important. When we claim that something is important, we have to operationalize it in our curriculum in the way that we teach people from the very beginning and not towards the end, which is the natural thing to do if you aren't very careful about how important you think that it is.
And certainly to Mr. Crenshaw, I'm sure you have some thoughts about this as well. And, we applaud the point about, hey, we want to drive on American leadership of what we're doing with artificial intelligence. And thank you, Ms. Singh. By the way, I've just so thoroughly enjoyed not only your testimony, but the answers to your questions. But how do we balance these things out, right? We sometimes see, too much of a good thing per se, and we don't, we like standards. We're doing standards. You've said you like the risk management, but, in some ways, right, we see companies getting pushback because they haven't self-regulated and the ethics component isn't there. And so, where and how do we find that balance? And maybe that's articulated through boards. How does that populate? And maybe Ms. Singh can chime in too.
I think it's critically important, one note to make, that we have the critical decision makers in companies involved in this process as well. Not only do technologists have a role, but C-suite does as well. And also, you know, we need more education out there about the need to build in ethical AI into standards for companies and how they operate. I've talked to some companies that are actually developing their own ethical frameworks and have full-time ethicists who are being brought on. We had a hearing actually at the Cleveland Clinic about 4 months ago in which they've now brought on an ethicist as well as they're using AI to treat their patients. So it's important, and I think companies are beginning to see this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I think today we've established that AI is not a technical problem. It's a socio-technical problem that really needs multi-stakeholder perspective and viewpoints. So I totally agree that there's a need for education, there's a need for involvement from multiple stakeholders. But if I may, I think the companies we work with, they're still struggling with what does good look like. And this is where we believe that government has a critical role to play in thoughtful policymaking and in these standards to at least give that context to these companies, because everyone right now, even if they're trying to self-regulate, do not know what does good look like. So our ask right now is really making sure that there is more transparency around how these systems are built and deployed.
Yeah, right. And there's also certainly examples from throughout history where the notion of good has gotten it wrong. But with that, why don't I turn it over to Mr. Feenstra for 5 minutes of questioning? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm so glad that we could have an extra round of questions. And Dr. Isbell, thank you again for all your comments. I've been enjoying listening to you. And as academics, to me, the challenge is I finished my dissertation on maternity health care in rural America. And the challenge is, you know, we talk about ethics, but there's this fine line of how we access data and the barriers that are put on to try to get the data. And so how do we thread that needle of, you know, there's a need to have the data and to create trustworthy AI systems, and yet there's that balancing act of ethics. Can you dive into that a little bit?
I mean, I do have my opinions about how to solve all problems around ethics, but it's a very deeply difficult question. I think the best way of thinking about it is to help people to articulate explicitly what it is, what the trade-offs are, and where they want to live in that space of trade-offs. If people can understand the trade-offs, they can make informed decisions. I guarantee you that, first off, there's more data about you out there in the world than you have ever imagined, and that people know more about you than you wish that they did. Yeah. And that could be a good thing, because one day it may save your life. On the other hand, it's your privacy and it's who you are, and people shouldn't just be able to get access to that data just because they can.
Is there any data, though, that you'd say that would be beneficial, that you know, you look at it and say, okay, this is captive that we can't get at, that might be helpful as we move into trustworthiness in AI?
I think that that's a conversation that involves, as we've been saying all along, all the stakeholders who are involved. I will add one thing, though, which is, although I think that bottom-up thinking is good, and it's something that's driven us to innovation, it says right there in this chamber that where there is no vision, the people perish. Sure. And the vision has to come from elected officials, it has to come from government, and it has to be a conversation about where it is we agree we want to go.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Very, very good and thoughtful words. Ms. Singh, very intrigued by what your organization does. So if you look at how we build appropriate safety and security into products, do you see a role in government, or how do we incentivize going down this path, especially in the private sector? I mean, I think the private sector has some accountability in going down this path, but do you see anything that we can do? You know, we can put parameters, I get that. But we also, to me, have to do something to allow people to say, all right, I want to. All right, you have any thoughts on that?
Thank you so much for that question, because I certainly do have many thoughts on it. But one that I would love to reemphasize here is the companies we work with right now, they are recognizing the importance of transparency reporting and disclosures, because that transparency is helping them build trust with their consumers and truly get that competitive advantage. But one of the reasons that these companies are not sharing these transparency reports broadly is because they don't know how their competitors or others in the market stack up to it.
Yes.
So at Credo AI, we are big proponents of the government coming up with standards that can not only mandate disclosures, but I think it will propel a thoughtful benchmarking across these AI applications.
Yeah, that's a great thought, that you can be protective in your data, but if the government says, wait a minute, this is universal data that everybody could use, that could be a game changer a little bit. Again, ethics plays a fine role in that. Thank you. With that, I'm out of time. Thank you.
And we'll hear from Dr. McNerney for 5 minutes of additional questioning.
Well, good. Now that you're back, I can thank you for having this hearing. It's great. And again, I want to thank the witnesses. Ms. Singh, I feel bad about leaving you out first round. But I have two big concerns about AI, and I'll throw the first one to you. The first one is and machine learning, which has really overtaken AI. That AI will overtake an increasing number of decision-making from humans, pushing us more and more into irrelevance and sort of dehumanizing us. What can we do to prevent that, pushing us aside with the decision-making capability of AI?
Thank you so much for that question. With any disruptive technology, be it AI, we see there are huge economic impacts. And we see that in changes in workforce, the role that humans will play in the future of work. But as we step back and think about it, I think we have a great opportunity right now to invest more in education. As Dr. Isbell mentioned, I'm excited his son is going to be getting educated on AI because I think that's going to be critical. But thinking about reskilling and upskilling in this age of AI is going to give us a competitive edge.
So that's a great answer. Educate more people so that we can utilize the AI in a more productive way than letting it make decisions for us. And that's basically what you're saying, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Very good. Okay, thank you. The next one, I guess I'll go to Dr. Isbell again. AI, one of my other concerns about AI is that it's being used to monitor humans and our behaviors, our habits, especially either in autocratic nations or by businesses that would like to be able to influence our decision-making in terms of the way we spend our money. What do you think is a way to mitigate that issue?
So first off, you're right. That's exactly what happened. It's been happening for a long time. Black Friday is a thing that happens because it gets people to buy things, right? So this is hardly new. What has happened is computing and AI has made it much more efficient and easier to deploy. My answer to that, I have two. One is that it's education. It's making people aware of what's happening and allowing them to make reasonable decisions. The other is that there are policies and there are technical mechanisms that we can employ. We can encourage people to develop and to deploy that will allow people to understand what is happening to them. You are, in fact, being studied. Your data is, in fact, predicting this behavior, and you're doing this. And giving people the tools, not just of the stuff that they know, the education they learn on their own, but the technical tools that allow others to monitor the monitors. That is a place that has a lot of potential and not one that we've invested a great deal into.
Well, the French postmodernists in the 30s, 1930s and 40s were sort of warning us that the government would be getting more and more information about us and being able to use that information to control our political decision-making as individuals. And that's sort of what I was worried about. And now what we're seeing with social media is that some of these companies are using information to direct people into political bubbles that may advocate violence or other sort of extreme behavior. And I think that's one of the issues that I'm having with how do we tamp that down. Do you have any recommendations, Mr. Crenshaw, on how we could go about doing that?
Well, I think when it comes to any time we're looking at the use of algorithms, we have to look at it from a risk-based approach. And I think we also need to realize that there are some benefits also to artificial intelligence that we've seen. And one of the things I wanted to note is that what we've learned is that the more people know about AI, the less scared or concerned they are about it. And I think that's why education about artificial intelligence is so important. But companies also need to build in ethics and ethical decision-making into their AI as well, too. And we see companies that are leading in this space.
It's hard to regulate that. And I'm thrilled that we're hearing about companies hiring ethicists, but how do we get that as a part of the corporate mindset that, you know, we need to do this in the future? So it's not something we can regulate, I don't think.
I agree that C-suite needs to be involved. It needs to be part of corporate culture, is building in ethics into artificial intelligence. But at the same time, I think the work we're seeing at agencies like NIST are getting us in the right direction toward where we want to be.
Thank you. I'll yield back.
Thank you. And with that, I don't believe we have any other questions. So we're going to bring the hearing to a close. Do we have one more? Oh, did Baird come back? Okay, hold on. I'm not closing. Where is he? Dr. Baird. He's not coming in. Well, we got questions for the record, too. Okay. We're prepared to close. All right. Well, we're prepared to close. But honestly, we're not going to close the door on the conversation because this has only brought up more questions. And in fact, we could probably have a hearing on a couple of different subsets that we discussed today. I believe with this committee, and as Mr. Gonzalez, who, you know, I've been so privileged to work with during his couple of terms here in the Congress, mentioned, you know, taking research applications, commercializing them, recognizing where our economy filters in. We also recognize that we're in a leadership moment, and this is, you know, we have been deeply privileged to have Dr. McNerney through his tenure, his mighty tenure in the Congress on this committee, and he's so dedicated to this committee. But this is a leadership moment for the United States of America, and we are going to shape how the world's going to go on this. We want to be able to shape how the world's going to go, and we've got to be prepared to do some of the deeper work. It's not just the question of harm, but it's also the questions of, you know, the meta challenges that come before us that are somewhat brought on by AI. It's forcing us to be more collaborative. It is forcing us to come together in ways that we didn't last century. I left out that I was working at a digital research lab before coming to this body, and we did a taxonomy, Mr. Crenshaw, on the IoT jobs, you know, how companies are going to have to hire. We did this in partnership with Manpower Group and a host of other industry and academic partners. Digital ethicists came up. That was one of the job profiles we came up with. That was just 5-6 years ago. And I mentioned Turing test, and we were so possessed when I was in school by the Turing test. Like, we thought that was going to be the question. And Mr. Sherman sort of got to that in his questions. You know, oh, are we worried about replacing humanity? No, we are talking about what Dr. Isbell said in his testimony. Culture, changing culture. Now, we influence culture through the laws we pass in this body. And we have been addressing some meta challenges. I didn't have the privilege of having Mr. Feenstra here last term, but I know we would have been working together on the trade deal, the USMCA. You have the unions and the chamber came together to pass USMCA. This time around, we passed Inflation Reduction Act. For the first time ever, you know, we're dealing with climate. You've got the environmental groups and the industry partners, my automakers, saying they want the same thing. So these digital applications, these complex artificial intelligence systems that we're putting into place, they're asking us to come together. So, Ms. Tabassi, you know, we're going to come back to you because we think NIST solves all of our problems. The mighty agency that can with a little. And we're excited about that, and we're going to come visit you, and we're going to talk about how you're stitching together with your risk management what Dr. Isbell said and what Ms. Singh is saying. Who's at the table? Who's at the table? You know, we solve some problems in ones and twos, and then we look at some of the broader challenges. But overall, we're wildly optimistic. We're working on the vision, and we're excited that we had this time together today. Hopefully the rest of the Congress tunes in on C-SPAN later. But with that, we're going to close it. We're going to leave the record open for a couple of weeks for additional questions for the record, and our witnesses are excused. Thank you.